A ball of fire pierces the atmosphere of Mars, plummeting towards the surface at 13,200 miles per hour. This fireball across the horizon marks the end of a 301 million-mile journey for NASA's InSight and the beginning of a groundbreaking mission. For 5 decades, NASA probes have explored the exterior of the Martian landscape and atmosphere. But now, for the first time, the InSight lander will go deeper than ever before inside the ancient mysteries of the Red Planet. What's inside Mars? And how can the Red Planet help us better understand our own?
Go Atlas. Go InSight.
This is the Atlas V.
4, 3.
On May 5th, 2018, it became the first rocket to launch an interplanetary mission from the west coast of the United States. Cruising through space for 205 days, InSight will fly almost halfway around the Sun and eventually intersect with its final destination, Mars. The fourth planet from the Sun, Mars is the second smallest in the solar system. It's a rocky planet like Earth, but much of what's inside is still a mystery. To give us a window into Mars's deep interior, NASA's InSight lander will check the planet's vital signs for clues. Unlike previous Mars missions, this probe will stay in one place for the duration of its mission. First, it will check its pulse. Its sensitive seismometer will gauge vibrations from meteor impacts or Marsquakes caused by shifting rocks. Listening to these shakes and quakes will make it possible for us to determine the depth and composition of its crust, mantle, and core. Next, InSight will check the planet's temperature. Its heat probe will burrow deep underground up to a depth of 16 feet beneath the Martian surface. This groundbreaking device will measure the planet's interior temperatures and track how they fluctuate throughout the year. To complete its checkup, InSight will test the reflexes of Mars by measuring small changes in a radio signal from Earth. This will show us how much the planet wobbles in its rotation, which can give us clues about its core composition. If Mars has a liquid core, its rotation will be more wobbly. And if its core is more solid, we'll see less wobbling. When studied together, these vital signs will give us valuable insight into rocky planets, as well as improve our understanding of how they form. It's exciting to consider the future possibilities of human habitation on Mars. But as we look forward, we must also make sure to look backwards to learn from our solar system's ancient past. Who knows what secrets the universe might reveal?
Hello and welcome to this week's Property News Update. And joining me in just a moment, my co-host for this week, Nicola McDougall. A quick trip around the world this week, and that's only fitting since we're just back from New York. We've got some good news out of Singapore, not so good news out of the Middle East. Brexit puts UK property on the nose, and the Airbnb sex house. Back in just a moment. And joining me once again is my co-host, Nicola McDougall from Bricks and Mortar Media. G'day, Nicola.
Hello, Kevin. Welcome home.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we had a great trip, and Kieran Clare was sensational. He's a
good man.
He's a good egg. He's a good egg.
He's a good egg, as we would say in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, we took a leaf out of his book because he thoroughly researches everything, which you'd expect from a journalist or a great journalist like you guys are. So, yeah, no, it was brilliant. Thank you for letting us have him for a couple of weeks. It was good.
I'm glad that you both survived the polar vortex, though. What timing?
Yes, it was a bit cold. I sent some photos home to the family, and the snow was actually going sideways. It was
I don't think I could have coped, but it was extraordinary. Like, you were in that, and it was extraordinary hot here in Australia at the same time. So
it's such a contrast, because we flew from one side of the states to the other. We flew across to California from New York, and it was like a 5 hour, I think it's about a 3 or 4 hour plane flight or something. But the difference in climate was quite amazing. Like, California was really nice and sunny and beautiful weather, yet across in New York it was snowing and minus 20 degrees. So yeah, terrible. Oh, well, good, but, Yeah,
it's interesting, though, because if you flew from the East Coast to the West Coast here, the temperature is not the same, but it's all, I guess, about latitude and longitude, longitude, and things like that. I'm glad that you're safe home.
Don't say that after a few drinks. Hey, let's get to our first story. Singapore property prices grow. Firstly, I guess a lot of us sort of go into Singapore and just sort of fly in and out, but it's a great place to stay, and some really good news about property prices there too.
Indeed, it looks like property prices in Singapore are firming. What's interesting about Singapore, I find, and you're right, most of us probably in the beginning when we go, north to the other side of the world, we stop off in Singapore, and then over time we end up just doing the layover at the airport, which is amazing. Sunflower Garden, Butterfly Garden. But Singapore, I was just doing some research before the show, Kevin, the third most densely populated country in the world, 7,804 people per square kilometre. Has a population of about 5.6 million, and it's only about 722 square kilometres in size. So property prices there have always been high. I had actually a few years ago, I went to a conference down in Sydney with Pippa, and there was someone from Singapore there who was had a very interesting presentation about some of the affordable housing options that they create there in Singapore, because there's so many people on such a small piece of land. It's not surprising that the prices there continue to go up.
Well, not surprisingly too, that units constitute about 78% of the market. They're all properties. Not a lot of foreign investment, about 6%. Occupancy, not surprisingly, up around 95%. So, projects, like anywhere in the world, I guess, are popular. There, but it's all about location, the features, and also the marketing. But interesting story there out of Singapore. Going to go to story number 2 now, still on our round the world trip. Dubai. Better said. Yeah, Dubai. Prices slipped dramatically. A bit of a surprise, this one, down by about 50% in some of the more prestigious areas as well.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, Kevin, but Kieran, my business partner, and I, when we were both working together a number of years ago, were flown to Dubai to go to the International Property Show. I think it was 2014, 15, rings a bell, something along those lines. And we actually spent a number of days in Dubai, which by the look of this story was probably reflective of the peak of the market at that point in time.
Yeah, 2014, I think, was the peak.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. And we did obviously appear at the property show, but I also spent some time with an LJ Hooker agent in Dubai, and was shown around a lot of the developments, including the World Islands. Somehow found myself sitting down with a billionaire property developer, which was a big thing as a journalist, where you just kind of go, oh, do you want to meet so-and-so? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then you sit down, and next thing you know, he's talking about a development that has room for your own private jet boat. But Dubai, of course, a lot of things happening in that region. Oil prices flat, probably the reason why prices there have declined, I think, a quarter over the last 4 years.
Yeah, interesting you talk there about Dubai, the marina. It's a man-made area, 80 towers in there, right at the water's edge. But transactions in Dubai down by about 22%, and that tallest building, the Burj
Khalifa.
Yeah, Burj Khalifa. Back in 2014, which you were talking about there, prices around $1 million. You can now pick the same property up there for 550.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the extreme. Generally, across Dubai, prices have come back by about 25%. But it is a market check, and it's all about oversupply, I think.
That's right. And I did actually, when I was there, and just as a side note, an anecdote, Kieran and I actually had dinner with several hundred other people at the base of the Burj Khalifa.
Did you?
When we were there. And it was quite extraordinary because every table, like there was hundreds of people, got served at exactly the same time. There was one waiter per guest. It was very interesting experience. Wow. But there was a lot. Dubai in the old days, there was a lot of lawlessness. There actually wasn't a lot of real estate legislation, and so things were getting completely out of hand. And at about that time, actually, now I think about it, about that time, a lot of the legislation was coming in, which was stopping this huge number of a huge amount of speculation that was happening in the market, selling and on-selling, and then on-selling pieces of land multiple times without anything being built. But also that oversupply story, which was in the thick of it back in those days. And now here we are seeing the outcome, the fallout from that.
Yeah, it's a lovely spot. We flew in there.
Hot.
We stayed there for an overnight stay. Interesting that in the heat of the afternoon, when it gets really hot, the place actually closes down, but really comes to life at night. By any chance, did you get to see the underground museum when you were there?
No, I didn't. I did go to the snow though, inside of one of those massive, great big shopping centres.
How they can create those sorts of environments in a particularly hot area.
Well, and as you would expect, as being in the Middle East, as someone who's a hummus aficionado, some of the best, my top 5 hummus around the world would have to have been when I was in Dubai.
Yeah, no, wonderful stuff. Hey, you're going to go to our next story, empty houses getting taxed. This could be a solution to homelessness. In the UK, they plan to increase council tax on empty houses. So we'll put that into context in a moment by giving you some numbers. But interesting that a council here has taken the move to, I think they're almost increasing the tax by an extra 50%.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In Cambridge, I think it is. Yeah. What was interesting with the story, Kevin, was the fact that they did actually disclose that they didn't have a huge problem with empty properties, but there was a percentage of properties that had been empty for 10 years, which is extraordinary. So what they're suggesting is increasing the council rates by 50% if your property has been empty for, I think was it 2 years?
Yeah. 2
but
years.
Also, what was interesting in the story as well was that's just the start. By 2021, those council rates will be increased by 300% if your property is empty for a significant period of time. Clearly, like the Singapore story, I guess, but a different sort of location. That there is there's obviously a paucity of properties available for rent, and homeless, obviously in the UK, much more, is a difficult situation. And what they're wanting is people to rent out their houses if they've got an empty space. Yeah. Let someone live in it.
That's right, exactly. It makes me wonder. Well, I'll just give you the numbers first. 100 properties, 2 to 5 years. 41 properties, 5 to 10 years. 39 properties, more than 10 years. But interestingly enough, that's only 1% of that entire area have been vacant for more than 6 months. So putting that into perspective, but it makes me wonder if there'll ever be a tax on empty rooms as opposed to empty homes. So that could be an interesting extension to that.
Don't you think that would be a little bit too much Big Brother into your personal life? I mean, if you're in an empty nester,
in anything, any invasion is, but
Well, that's right, exactly.
Rather than a tax, they probably should offer an incentive.
Well, indeed, exactly. Yeah. And like they have here in Australia, where they have incentivised people to downsize. Yep. But I think what's interesting with this story as well is I wonder what percentage of those properties might be deceased estates or inherited properties where the people that have inherited them have no desire to become an investor, or they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to let that sit there and grow in value until such a time as I sell it, or there might be something to do with death taxes. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's a reasonable excuse. I think you've got to be careful. Remember that story we carried last year where a house had been vacant for a period of time and someone just took it over, took ownership of it.
Well, and that's the thing in the UK as well. Is I lived there in the 1990s myself, and what is it called where people come in and they don't leave again? Squatters. Then over time, I think, well, it used to be that they would actually have a right over that property. So
Well,
you are.
that was the story we carried last year. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, possessions,
9/10 of the law. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is it 9/10?
So
Something like that anyway.
I don't know if that's actually true, but it's a useful saying that we like to say.
We'll go with that anyway. We're going to come back in just a moment with our next story about Brexit getting blamed for UK price slumps. Back in just a moment. Okay, welcome back to the show. We're going to stay in the UK, and one of the Brexit impacts so far is that prime London property is tumbling in price, and some agents are blaming the impact of Brexit on that, Nicola.
Well, this is a prime example of confidence impacting a market, and the top end of the market is always one that is affected the most and the most quickly by any type of confidence issues, but especially the political turmoil that the UK has been in for a number of years, not helped by, the shenanigans over the last few weeks either. And now clearly there are, to me, I guess, ridiculous calls. Or maybe people didn't understand what they were voting for when they voted for it. And now, there's a big cohort of the population that don't actually want to leave the EU. And all of that, political unease has a massive impact on the economy generally, and no one really knows. It's the great unknown, isn't it? No one really knows what the economic impact is going to be of the UK's removal from the EU, and perhaps that top end of the market, there is, top end of the market, you're talking about the uber rich here, in the classic sense, the classic use of the word Uber, until someone hijacked it, who are perhaps, I don't know, maybe they're cutting their losses. Who knows what they're doing, but they say, well, maybe this isn't the right place for us to be anymore, because it is the great unknown. No one really understands what's going to happen, including the leaders of that country, by the look of it. Yeah,
but in 2018, the last quarter of last year, anyone buying top London property and using US dollars averaged about a 36% saving compared to 2014 peaks prices. So, therein lies some opportunities. Transactions are down 13%. So certainly you'd have to think the uncertainty around Brexit and what's going to happen is actually having an impact. And admittedly, I'm not sitting in judgment at all, because I'm only watching this from arm's length. I have no knowledge, any deep knowledge about Brexit or, the pros and cons. But it always seems strange to me, Nicola, that they would put something as critical as that to the public without really clearly defining what it was all about. I must admit, I think it was, just a highly emotive issue.
Well, I think as well, when David Cameron first suggested that this go to the public vote, I think he truly believed that the result would be the opposite of what it was. And obviously he lost his job. Now we have Theresa May. There was a meme going around the day after the Brexit result came out, and the number one searched Google term was, what is the EU?
Yeah.
In the UK. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Incredible.
But it's, I think a lot of people, thought that they knew what it was or whatever, and there has been, obviously, as we know, globally, a period of time now where I guess every country is kind of like more looking inwards than looking outwards, and being a bit more protectionist and things like that. And now here we are, and I still don't actually know what the latest is. It's a movable feast, seems to change every day.
Yeah, I think there's a deadline coming up, but we'll watch that with interest and see what does happen. I want to take you to our final story.
With your multi-millions, you could your multi-million pounds, you could go and buy something by Harrods, perhaps.
Well, we're looking at putting a studio into London, so you never know. There might be, it might be worth our while to do just that. Hey, we're going to take you to our last story. A bit of a giggle, this one. Sex sells, maybe. This is a bit of a bonus story out of the US. I have actually watched a couple of the videos on this link. Just a word of warning, if you are going to watch it, there's some pretty bad language in there, so make sure the kids aren't listening in when you're doing it. But the story here is about a couple, interesting story about how they met. And why they've decided to put their $750,000 home on Airbnb. I think, is it Airbnb? Yeah, it is Airbnb, because it's a sex mansion. But they've actually created that. So it is an interesting article and an interesting story, Nicola. Did you read it?
I did read it, and when I first saw it, I thought, oh dear, like we've got some S&M people here trying to rent out their property. I thought it was a very risque one for us to talk about, Kevin. So clearly, I like it a lot. But reading the story, it's wonderful to see they're both creatives in different ways, and this couple that met last year. After the gentleman unfortunately was widowed, have realised that they've become a blended family, realised they needed to make some changes, didn't want to sell their property, did some research, got creative, got some big thinking happening, excuse the pun, and decided that, perhaps they could market it as a sex mansion on Airbnb where people, or sex hotel. And what was funny in this story was when it says, unfortunately, there is no handbook on how to create a sex hotel. So they just did a lot of research. Got a lot of advice, and next thing you know, there's obviously the listing that features prominently them sitting fully clothed, I might say, in a sex swing, or whatever that might be.
Oh, wasn't I didn't pick up on that. So
various other bits and pieces that are involved in that type of thing. That floats your boat, no problem.
Yeah, well,
I just think it's great. I think it's really thinking outside of the square. Yeah,
well, you're paying $750 a night weeknights, and $2,000 a night if you want to get it on the weekend. So you'd want to be making sure that you use all the resources that are made available. Hey, I had to laugh when I looked at the video of the real estate agent doing the inspection and sort of saying when she listed it, she had a multitude of callers, and she had just done some inspections prior to doing the video, and she was talking about the interested parties out on the driveway saying, oh yes, I'm really interested, But open homes, wouldn't they be fascinating? And you'd almost probably have to advertise private inspections.
Well, indeed, and certainly probably need to be 18 plus. So if a family of 7 turned up with some 5 and 7-year-olds that might need to be entertained out on the backyard before walking in and asking mummy and daddy some very awkward questions. Yeah,
well, the way they've framed the marketing, I think you'd know exactly what you're walking into, Nicola. You wouldn't be walking into a nice, wholesome family home. That is for sure. Great story.
The Waltons, it's not.
Yeah, a great story, and thanks to Stephen Showery, our editor, for finding that one. He's got a warped sense of humour as well, same as you and I. He said, I think you guys will like this one, and he's spot on. Yeah. So there you go. Hey, good talking to you, my friend. I love the flowers behind you too, by the way. Are they real? Are they real?
No, they're not, but I'm sitting here in my new location after doing a bit of a sea change and becoming a rent investor. This will be the new backdrop from now on.
Hey, interesting about fake flowers, those ones behind you. They're so good now at making fake flowers look real. The real ones almost look fake. Think about that.
Exactly. And also having these ones, darling, I never have to remember to water them, which is good for someone like me who spends most of the time with my head in the clouds.
Okay, you don't have to water them, but you've got to dust them.
I do have to dust them, or my cleaner does.
Yeah. Yes.
Time is money.
Yes. Good on you. Talk soon.
Thank you, Kevin. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Nicola McDougall from Bricks and Mortar Media, and we'll see you next time as well.
First time out, you know, you got to come out swinging. We had a goal. I mean, She's Gonna Happen did not happen right after NY Film School. You know, so all the time after graduating film school, I was working towards my first feature. People are not gonna come to New York City because Spike Lee says anything. I mean, New York City is an advertisement, you know, of its own. I've done several films about Brooklyn, where Brooklyn is the backdrop. Do the Right Thing, Crooklyn, Clockers, and they're just stories that take place here. I don't know what it is, but there's something about Brooklyn. It's the people, the diversity, the culture, the people that make up this great borough. I mean, I grew up here, you know, developed person who I am, who I've become, and so therefore, that has been the subject of a lot of my films. The one thing I will say, that if you do come to New York City, you gotta walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. That's a requirement. This is the greatest bridge that's been built.
London Bridge is small potatoes compared to the Brooklyn Bridge. If you can, before you leave this planet, you must come here to visit.
You know, I was never gonna move to Hollywood, to LA. Scorsese's here, Woody Allen's here. They didn't move. People gotta discover for themselves. I mean, discover for yourself. Discover for yourself.